Do you know your constitutional rights? Our founding fathers died to give every American citizen freedom of speech, due process, freedom of assembly, and the freedom to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Rise, stand tall, be bold, and be grateful for your American heritage. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave, where everything is possible. And we are the people. Okay, welcome back to the show. We are doing part 2 of immigration law to the United States. And I have all 3 lawyers back in the studio, David Nachman, Snehal Batra, and Ludka Zimovcak. And we're going to continue where we left off last week to talk about what's going on in our country today and how it affects you and the immigrant coming to the United States. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having us, Geeta.
Great. All right. So let's pick up where we left off. Today, I want to talk to you about a few things. The first thing is, I heard that the immigration courts are overloaded. Now, are there any efforts being taken to ease the burden on the immigration courts at this time?
Yeah, that's the understatement of the year, Geeta. There are huge backlogs. The immigration courts are overburdened. As of just to give your audience some numbers, because this is shocking, is that as of December 2021, there were 1.6 million cases in the immigration courts. And then as of April 2022, that number has increased to 1.8 million cases pending in the courts nationwide, the immigration courts. So it's going to take probably on an average of about 5 years to process your immigration case with the immigration court. And in New Jersey, we have over 200,000 pending cases as of April. So the New Jersey courts are certainly overwhelmed and understaffed. You know, of course, the partial shutdown with COVID contributed to this backlog growth, but the backlogs continue to increase and we need more judges, we need more resources. The courts now are using WebEx for hearings, so that's been very helpful in trying to move some of these cases along. The court is now also requiring electronic filing rather than paper. I mean, you would think, you know, in the U.S. that this has not already been happening for years and years, but it's only recently come into play. And also with the Immigration Service, only a handful of applications are allowed to be filed online. So, but in any event, going back to the courts, the big news that came out this month is prosecutorial discretion. Under the Biden administration, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, he issued a prosecutorial priorities memo, basically providing guidelines for enforcement priorities to apprehend and remove only those people that were a threat to our national security. Well, what happened is recently the courts have, the Texas District Court vacated this memo. So the issue now is the government, the ICE attorneys that represent immigration, are they going to continue to exercise prosecutorial discretion? You know, it's one way to reduce the backlog, to close out some of these cases, dismiss the cases so that the courts can really focus on those people that belong in removal proceedings. So we have yet to see what's going to happen. But, you know, what we really need is an independent court, you know, an Article 1 court. Currently, the immigration court is under the Department of Justice. And so the immigration courts answer to the Attorney General. So Congress really needs to pass legislation creating an independent immigration court. And that really is, I think, one key to try to, you know, reduce this backlog.
Okay. Now we're past the pandemic. We're in the post-acute pandemic era, and we do have people coming back to work. So is this still a labor shortage, or what is the reason for
these long backlogs?
Well, it's due to a number of factors. It's because obviously more and more cases are being filed, but yes, the courts are still not operating at 100% capacity. They are overstaffed. We need more judges. Usually, the immigration judges, they could be deciding 3,000 to 4,000 cases a year. That's huge. And these cases take a really long time to get before the immigration judge. And a lot of these cases don't have to be in the court system, because immigration or ICE, they're issuing notices to appear, meaning placing the individual in removal proceedings. And it takes many years to just get before the judge because of these delays, shortage of staff. So it's just the entire system really needs an overhaul.
So there have been backlogs even before COVID, just to make the record straight. So there have always been issues with the courts, like it would take really long time for the removal proceedings to be completed. And with COVID, it got so much worse, obviously. So the backlogs are huge.
And the proposed new rules, the proposed new asylum rules, interestingly, they created sort of intervention where the officers who work for USCIS will be able to make determinations before the cases end up in the courts. So this is a way that they've sort of to clear the backlogs or to reduce the number of cases that end up in the courts. They are hoping that determinations can be made at a lower level.
Okay.
Right. That's why prosecutorial discretion is so important, because it gives the prosecutor basically the ICE trial attorney the ability to not prosecute and say, you know what, we don't need to be wasting our resources because this individual is not a security threat. They have a potential immigration benefit that would allow them to become legal. So that's why it's really important.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And what are the options for green card holders who might be stuck abroad for long periods of time due to the pandemic?
This is a good question, Gita. And unfortunately, a lot of people from different countries are still stuck or were stuck during the pandemic. So let's say the green card holder left to visit the family. I'm going to just give example to India or different country. And obviously there were travel bans in place. Number one, issues with the airlines. They couldn't find the flight to come back. So with the green card holders, they are supposed to be back within 6 months. They should not be out of the country for more than 6 months, and definitely not over 1 year if they don't have re-entry permit. So we've seen a lot of people with issues, where they're stuck, they couldn't get back, and they've been out of the country for more than 1 year, which means they abandoned their lawful permanent status. So what are the solutions? Number one, which is not ideal, is filing an SB1 application for those that have been out of the US for more than 1 year. SB1 is a returning resident application. Again, it's not ideal because we have backlogs at the consulates as well. So this would require the individual to get an appointment and present their case to show that this was beyond their control. They couldn't return back to United States. Either there were medical issues. Of course, COVID is a great reason, but still there has to be some type of case presented showing the ties to the US, the reasons for being stuck abroad. So it's, again, not ideal because we've had clients that are waiting for these appointments for a long time. Second option is just trying to board a plane and coming to the United States. Again, it would be really important for the client to have all the evidence showing that they have ties to the US, what was the reason. And we find that the CBP officers are pretty friendly, letting these people enter and admit them, unless it was really long period of time, but it's really case by case basis. So if somebody wants to be super safe, SB1 application at the US consulate or embassy is probably safer option. But, it's really up to the individual.
Right. And these are all harsh measures put in place by the Biden administration, right? I mean, this is during the Biden administration, post or sort of in the COVID era. that he had placed some of these rules in place.
Well, actually, this
So-
is not related to the Biden administration. This is part of the regulations for a lawful permanent resident. So when you have a green card, you have to be permanently living in the US. If you make trips outside the US that are more than 6 months, then there's a presumption that the individual is abandoning their residency. So that's why they have to come back. Now, despite all of the COVID-19 issues and travel restrictions, there was no change to this requirement because it's not a COVID-19 requirement. You know, it's a lawful permanent resident requirement that you have to be living in the US. So this really is not anything new. This has always been the case. So whenever, if an individual is looking to be outside the US for more than a year, if you are a green card holder, you have to apply for a reentry permit, which then allows you to be outside the US for up to 2 years without jeopardizing your ability to come back. So it's not a new requirement.
The problem with COVID, of course, was that people did not file reentry permits because they didn't expect that suddenly they're not going to be able to fly back because of the COVID. So, but as I said, CBP officers are pretty flexible in adjudicating these cases, which is a good news. But you know, it's important to have documents and showing the ties to the United States.
Sure.
The
yeah.
biggest frustration, I think, is that you know, there was some consistency, if you will, before the pandemic, or even I guess into the pandemic, about using the SB1 process. But generally now we're finding that the SB1 process, we can't rely upon it at all. They're just arbitrarily denying every single SB1 case at the consulate. I believe that the reason for that is because of the pandemic. You know, 90% of the U.S. Department of State officers were brought back. They were repatriated. You know, so as a result of that, not many people are going back to the consulates abroad, and we're not in full swing there. So it's easy just to deny an SB1. So rather than to make a reasoned determination, they're just arbitrarily denying these cases. So obviously that leaves us with other options that we have to deal with, you know,
Plus,
to get
we
these
also
folks back.
We also need 2 consular officers that have to sign off and approve the SB1, which makes it, you know, exceedingly difficult to get this. And the decisions, as David mentioned, there's a huge disparity, because if you're, for example, applying in India, you know, they're going to give you a hard time if you've been outside, let's just say, for maybe 15 or 16 months, whereas maybe other countries, you can be outside for 2 years and there's no issue and they'll grant you the SB1. So it's you know, it's very frustrating when we have individuals who are stuck outside the US. But you know, we try to do the best we can to make sure that they have the documentation that they need to make their case with the consulate or CBP, as Ludka mentioned.
I think we have a lot of really great success stories in getting folks back, even after extended periods of time outside the country. And again, I think that as you both properly point out, the CBP officers seem to be incredibly liberal and understanding about you know, the reasons why folks have been you know, outside and for extended periods of time. We always tell clients to just travel with all the evidence that they have about how they've been maintaining their lawful permanent residence in the United States. Bring your bank account statements, bring your tax returns, show that you've been filing tax returns, bring proof of ownership of property in the United States, show that you're receiving mail at a US, you know, at a US address, show that you have a library card from the you know, from the place where you live. So you know, we've been helping clients understand what evidence they need in order to prove that they have you know, maintained their lawful permanent residence in the United States, notwithstanding these long delays of being outside.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's definitely great advice, and definitely appreciate that for clients who might be stuck abroad. And certainly a lot of them are stuck or were stuck because of the harsh mandates of this administration, which, you know, not letting certain people in the country just for vaccination purposes, all these things, which many have said are discriminatory. All right, so let's move on to the next question I have for you. What efforts are being taken to ease the extreme backlogs for non-immigrants and immigrant visa processing?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Again, I just want to start off with numbers because I think when people understand the number of applications, the court cases, they're just astounded. So to date, there are an estimated 9.5 million cases that are awaiting adjudication by the Immigration Service. That's a huge number, a huge number. And so, of course, the immigration, for years has grappled with this increased backlog, and especially during the Trump administration, but also which has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so in March of this year, actually, the Biden administration announced certain measures to reduce this backlog and speed up processing for certain types of applications. So one of the things that we're really excited about in our office, because we do a lot of employment-based applications, is expanding the premium processing. So premium processing is a fee, an additional fee of $2,500 that is paid to expedite processing of certain cases. So what immigration is going to be doing in the near future is they're going to allow premium processing of certain applications that are currently not eligible to premium process. So they're going to put into place like this phased in approach. And so we're excited about that. There's also talk about allowing premium processing for multinational managers in the future, which right now is not available, is only available for certain cases filed early last year. Also allowing expedite processing or premium processing for a change of status application for students, and then OPT for students as well under premium processing. So we're really excited about this expansion of premium processing. Another big one that we saw recently that was announced was the extending the automatic extension for employment authorization. So those individuals that were able to get an automatic 180-day extension of their employment authorization will now get an additional 360 days. So for a total of 540 days. So that's huge because many of our clients were facing issues with having to stop work because this backlog of the cases were just taking a really, really long time. There's also talk about staff increase because they are understaffed. In fact, recently we were on a panel with the USCIS Newark District Director, Mr. Thompson, that confirmed that they are going to be hiring additional staff. So that's, that will help ease some of this backlog that we're facing. And then slowly but surely, the consulates are now reopened, not at 100% capacity, but they have resumed processing of the immigrant visas. So we're hopeful that over the next, fiscal year, they're able to clear some of this backlog.
Another big one was employment-based interviews. So during the Trump's administration, I believe around 2018, they started with the interviewing each case that is employment-based green card case. And now, during the pandemic, that was waived, and they're just issuing green cards and sending the applicants via mail. So that definitely will reduce backlog because obviously now it's more family-based applicants that are interviewed as it was, and only some employment-based applicants. But if you can just imagine that this really doubled, there was a really huge backlog in interviews because they started those employment-based interviews. So that's definitely great news for our employment-based green card applicants.
The head of the the head of the USCIS also confirmed recently in a panel that she had presented to the American Immigration Lawyers Association during the New York conference about a week and a half ago, how they are utilizing information technologies in a much more efficient manner than they did in the past. And the use of IT and online filing now, which is starting to be stepped up. It got a very slow start, unfortunately, but these cases seem to be processed a lot faster. I think that the naturalization cases that we're seeing that are being filed online are now moving from, instead of 1 full year of processing, to about 4 weeks. So they're moving very quickly. Another thing that is coming is that, and this goes to sort of, Snehal, what you were talking about, is the ability to hire more people and to reduce backlogs, is that they're going to be considering higher fees for the cases. So the USCIS is going to be proposing higher fees. I think that they realized when they ended up in the fiscal mess that they were in about, I think it was about 9 months ago, or maybe even a year ago, where it was just awful. They had lost about 1/3 of their staff, maybe more. It was really traumatic for the administrative agency, but they now have proposed to increase fees to make them more commensurate with the actual workload or the amount of work that's required in order to get through these cases. So we're probably going to see increased fees from the USCIS and also increased fees from the EOIR within the next several months. So that's on their agenda.
Lastly, I want to mention at the U.S. consulates, they started with waiving the interviews, the actual interviews, because obviously U.S. embassies and consulates were really closed for a very long period of time. So there is tremendous backlog. Even though they're starting to get back on track, you can get appointment for 2023. So interview waivers are really helpful, and many individuals will qualify, those especially that already had some type of visa in the past 48 months. So I think this is really helpful because that will reduce the burden. Obviously, it's just sending the passport and documentation instead of going for in-person interview.
Okay, and some have said that some of the backlogs are from just a large resignation, people resigning, government workers resigning due to the vaccine mandates, or just the wage inflation due to all the higher demands on salary, things like that. So I think it's a very, very complex problem here. But is it possible to expedite non-immigrant or immigrant visa appointments somehow?
Yes, so that's a good news that it's possible. So let's go back to the non-immigrant visas. As I mentioned, I think what you're going to get right now is the date of 2023 for any type of visas. So it's important to expedite. And how do you do that? The key is to find an appointment. And that's a challenge. With some of the posts, it's really even challenge to find 2023 appointment. But once the individual will grab that appointment, then there is a possibility to make a request for an expedite. Obviously, there has to be a reason. So the individual would have to articulate what the reason is and what the emergency is for that particular expedite, but it's possible. And there is a 50-50 chance whether this is going to be granted. If yes, they'll get immediate appointment. For immigrant visas, it's a little bit different because the cases are at a national visa center. And, some cases have been there, unfortunately, for 2 years, due to the pandemic. And of course, there is a huge backlog. So again, there has to be a request made, has to be good reason, either medical reason, humanitarian, possibly financial. And the National Visa Center will forward it to that particular U.S. embassy. They'll decide whether it warrants an expediting. And at that point, the person, hopefully, if they grant it, can get early immigrant visa appointment. So there is a possibility, there is hope, but it's going to take time to get from that backlog.
Yeah, unfortunately, traveling to the US for purposes of attending a wedding or graduation is not going to qualify for an expedite appointment. We get calls like, oh, I have a relative that's getting married and we need to come, or a graduation ceremony. Those are not going to qualify for the expedite. There's also a possibility to expedite with USCIS, and that's not with the premium processing expedite. Okay, so immigration here in the US, they also have procedures to expedite your case. In fact, they have specific procedures to expedite healthcare workers and childcare workers for their EADs. And they're also, again, going to look at it on a case by case basis. You know, is there severe financial issue, emergency, or humanitarian reason? But you can't just bypass, your case in line. So for example, if you file something today, you can't call them next week, unless it is truly an emergency to try to expedite, because, there is a backlog and you have to wait a reasonable amount of time. But there is also a procedure with the Immigration Service.
And the USCIS website actually has a list of some of the reasons why you're allowed to expedite. They've sort of set forth what those, what the requirements are and what their protocols are. And we have helped numerous clients obtain, expedites for a variety of different reasons, according to what the USCIS has set out. And oftentimes that requires us, of course, to work closely with the clients to get evidence of the need for them to have that expedite. So being clear with the government offices to let them know why the expedite is required is critical.
All right. Thank you, David. Any more final thoughts from anyone else? We have about 2 minutes if you do. If not, that's fine. Okay. Well, it was great to have all of you on, 3 expert lawyers, again, from Visaserve. So this is an international immigration nationality law firm dedicated to providing all these services that they spoke of. Obviously, they're very well-versed in the law. They follow it closely and they have all the up-to-date information. So feel free to get in touch with them. I believe some of their information is posted as their backdrop, but again, it's Visaserve in New Jersey. You can easily find them online. They are available and they would love to help you with any of your immigration needs. So thank you so much all for coming on the show, and thank you viewers for watching this. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to catch updates as they become available. Thank you.